Hello everyone, and welcome back to Pokepaint, the series where I draw new Pokémon to populate my fan region of Tror, a region based on the US and British Virgin Islands. To my American audience, happy Thanksgiving. To the rest of the world, happy Thursday, I guess? Maybe happy belated week of the release of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet? I don't know. So November's been a pretty crazy month for me, not only on the channel, where I started my original series History of the Future, which took way more time and effort than I originally predicted, but my fiancé and I also did some traveling. We saw Niagara Falls and went to Canada for the first time. It was a really good trip, but unfortunately, as you could probably tell, the combination of prepping to travel and also trying to release a new series may have left you Pokepaint enjoyers a bit high and dry for some new content. Well, I am here to scratch that itch today. While in Canada, we went to the Royal History Museum of Ontario in Toronto, and while there we looked at their great fossil exhibits. It was then when I thought that I didn't really have any fossil Pokemon for Tror. Okay, not really. In truth, I've been cooking up this video since way before we took our little vacation, but I thought that that would make a cool transition. So most regions have fossil Pokemon, with a few exceptions. We usually tend to get a new set about every other generation. And Tror is not one of those regions. Yes, you heard me right. I don't plan to make any real original fossil Pokemon for the Tror region. Okay, I can tell you're probably a little bit confused. Let me explain. You all know how fossil Pokemon works, that you revive these Pokemon from their fossilized remains using a machine instead of catching them in the wild, as without this resurrection, they are completely extinct. This gameplay mechanic is, of course, based on Jurassic Park, as it released a few years beforehand. So, I wanted to let Jurassic Park inspire me the same way it inspired this aspect of the original games. Especially because Tror is a tropical region in a similar area of the world to where the fictional Isla Nublar is supposed to be. To give context before I fully explain my idea, all fossil Pokemon share the rock type with each other. However, they're not solely bound to it, as they can have an additional type. In lore that has something to do with the fact that they are revived from fossils that are made out of rock, and that the DNA in the specimen is incomplete, so the remainder of the information is overridden by the rock when they're revived. Pseudoscientific? Barely. More fantasy, but this is a good way to tie this group of Pokemon together thematically. For my version of fossil Pokemon, I wanted to explore the what-if scenario of what did these fossil Pokemon look like before they went extinct, and before whatever type they had before was overrun by the rock type. So in Tror, instead of reviving fossil Pokemon from the earth, you will be able to find and catch them in the wild, in Trupor's version of the Safari Zone. Does anybody remember that wealthy park curator that we battled back in the Eevee episode? And all of his funny little hints towards a biological preserve? That was a thinly veiled reference to Jurassic Park. The backstory to this island is that back in the time of the dinosaurs, the Pokesaurs? Ancient Pokemon. Anyways, the Earth was hit by a meteor, sending most of the Pokemon of the day into extinction, except on this island, where the environment was just stable enough so that these Pokemon could go on living as they had been for millions of years. Think Jurassic Park meets Skull Island. In the modern day, a wealthy curator discovers this island, and in order to fund the continued preservation of this island's unique environment, he opens a Safari Zone-like attraction, so that people can come, see, and catch these Pokemon as they were in the past. Welcome to Paleo Park. I'm going to do 5 whole fossil Pokemon over the course of 2 videos. The first 3 lines I'll do today, but I just wanted to get these 3 out to you guys because I'm really excited about all of them. I purposefully chose the more unabashedly dinosaur-like fossil Pokemon to make it feel as Jurassic Park-y as possible. So the first I chose was Aerodactyl. Taking out the rock type, Aerodactyl would just be a plain flying type, which doesn't really give it much in the way of new design ideas. After a little while, I thought of giving it the electric type, as it might be a cool design reference to the Native American Thunderbird, a massive flying creature, like the pterodactyl, that only existed in legend. What does a pterodactyl have to do with a thunderbird? Well, nothing really. But you have to admit, it's a pretty cool visual all the same. And I do need one or two more electric types anyway. So I shaped its wings like thunderbolts, as after a while it seemed like too good of an opportunity to pass up, and I gave it this fluffy pelt to, one, reference that many dinosaurs probably had feathers, or at least downy proto-feathers, and two, they were made to resemble dark thunderclouds. Initially, I wasn't super sold on my design, but it's definitely grown on me. Aerodactyl, the Pteranodon Pokemon. This Pokemon is descended directly from the Aerodactyl of the prehistoric age, and scientists agree that it shares more of its genetic material with the original than the resurrected version from the Kanto region. This Pokemon's massive wings generate electricity as they fly. When they fly in a flock, massive tropical storms often follow. The Cranidos line was my second pick, and possibly the easiest redesign to come up with. The original is just a rock type, and I took this to maybe mean that its original version was also a rock type, but it was maybe dual rock and something else. But that second type was overridden by the rock type when it was, resurrected. That type that I chose was fire, as I thought it would be a pretty cool idea to merge a Pachycephalosaurus Pokemon with a meteorite, as both are, one, heavily associated with the prehistoric age, and two, they're also both known for hitting things at high speeds. One a little more than the other. Although it's inaccurate to the original, I closed Cranidos' mouth in my version, because if you stare at its original artwork for long enough, the angle of its jaw just doesn't really make sense. Making its dome resemble a flaming meteor was a bit of a challenge, as I attempted to show a lot of directional movement with streams of molten rock sort of globbing off of its surface. You'll have to tell me if I accomplished it or not in the comments below. Cranidos, the headbutt Pokemon. After millennium of fossilization, the Cranidos that are resurrected today have lost the molten dome that they had in the past. However, the unmodified specimen that exists in the modern day on Paleo Park in the Tror region seem to have kept this trait from their ancestors. Rampardos, the evolved form of Cranidos, was a very simple design to build up from the first. Or it would have been had I not done this one before Cranidos. I actually drew this Pokemon while I was on my trip. It was one of the best experiences I've ever had drawing a Pokemon, actually. We rented out this really nice hotel, in which had a really nice bathtub and a fireplace. So after a bath, I sat by the fire in a super comfy robe and drew this Pokemon, having a great view of Niagara Falls from my hotel room window. This is maybe not what everybody would do in such a romantic setting with their partner, all alone on a snowy night listening to calm Christmas music. But I draw Pokemon on the internet for fun, so I'm a weird guy. At this point, I had drawn almost all the Pokemon for this video, so I actually had a realization that older Pokemon tend to have nonsensical, almost impossible biology in their original art that may not be seen at first glance. And replicating it while still leaving room for your own additions is definitely a bit of a challenge if you're going to do something like this. I also changed its color palette, as I was originally going to use its shiny, as it has red in its original version, and that seemed perfect, but a duller, more dinosaur-y palette both fit with its aesthetic, and also made a good pair with its counterpart Bastiodon, which I had already drawn at this point. Rampardos, the headbutt Pokemon in the evolved form of Cranidos. They attack with the rock-hard domes on their heads. They charge at supersonic speeds using the friction in the air to light their flammable head domes, leaving a fiery streak in their wake. In the aftermath of their attacks, massive craters can be found in the earth. Shieldon was the first Pokemon that I drew for this video, and possibly my favorite of the bunch. As Cranidos is supposed to be an unstoppable object, and Shieldon is an impossible barrier, I couldn't really change that part of its design. But I never intended to. Instead, I chose to reference how technology evolves similarly to how living creatures do. Another way to interpret the Cranidos design that I did is that it could also appear to resemble a cannonball, a sort of ancient version of a bullet. So as Shieldon is a little metal shield Triceratops in its original, I thought I would use an ancient wooden shield as my inspiration for this variant. Just like how creatures evolve over time to suit them to different environments, so too does technology, and I feel that I represented that here pretty well. Shieldon, the shield Pokemon. Scientists hypothesized that when the first Shieldon were resurrected, that the inclusion of a metal shield in their genetic code may have been an inaccurate depiction. We now know this to be a fact, as it can now more easily be seen that the markings on the shield fossil are not that of rusted metal, but petrified wood. My last design of the day is Bastiodon. Like its pre-evolution, I simply traced back the lineage of the technology that inspired this Pokemon in the first place. Instead of resembling the ramparts of a castle, my version of Bastiodon would have a shield that took the form of the wooden forts that might be found around an ancient Anglo-Saxon community. I discovered while drawing this part of the original's body that, like its counterpart Rampardos, its body sort of doesn't make sense, in that the original not only has no space for their knees, but actually is done at a slight angle, seemingly for no reason. Even with all of that said, I tried to recreate what wasn't changed as accurately as possible, as to still look good with my changes. Bastiodon, the shield Pokemon in the evolved form of Shieldon. Although the more accurate wooden armor of the prehistoric Bastiodon may at first seem to make them more vulnerable, the simplicity of its real armor allows for this Pokémon to be far more mobile than was originally considered. Its faceplates appear to be made of a substance produced from the Pokémon's body that most resembles petrified wood. So there we have it, our 5 new additions to the Pokédex for this week. But if you feel like you haven't got quite enough fossil Pokémon this time, don't worry, as I'm going to add a few more for next time. I thought if I'm not going to include technically real fossil Pokémon, I should at least give you guys a lot more material to chew on. Like I said before, it's been a pretty crazy month, traveling and preparing for holidays. I'm starting a new job soon, so for any viewers of History of the Future, Episode 2 will be coming out as soon as possible. However, as I'm drawing concept art for the surfaces of like 24 separate planets, that video is going to take a little longer than I planned on. Either way, for both that series and Pokepaint here, we have a few more exciting entries that I have cooking up for you guys next month. If you want to get those videos 2 days or more earlier than their public release, you can consider supporting me on Patreon. Either way, I'll see you next time. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, then subscribe, and turn on the bell to get notified when I upload next.